You tell the sheep it's time to eat, okay? We'll get going as soon as I get a thumbs up from the YouTube people. I mean, you never know. I gotta get this scimitar angle going on here. Are we live? Fantastic. Good morning, class. I can even now hear the dinner bell ringing throughout the building. I hope you enjoy it, because that's the new normal. Welcome back to our study of the book of Genesis. We had basically a month of no Genesis class. Now, for those of you who were not here in the building through the month of December, maybe you feel distressed that we didn't have Bible study. Well, we did. It just wasn't in this room, and it was a different class, and we didn't stream it. So you missed out, and that is, I have nothing to post on YouTube about it, but we're just all going to move forward together as we continue in our journey through Genesis. And I say that because I did give the opportunity for the folks in this class to off-ramp and pick a different topic, but I had 2 or 3 people say, please continue Genesis, and I had 0 people say anything else. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a majority. Perhaps not a quorum, but a majority. But as I said, it's been a month. I usually like to give a review at the start of every class, but I feel like it's extra important today, right? Is anybody suffering the New Year's haze? Me too. So let's talk about Genesis. Genesis is a book of beginnings, beginning of the world. What we will see very soon is the beginning of the people set aside for God, right? That will be I'm going to use the word the Hebrews right now, for reasons that'll come apparent here in a little bit. Eventually we'll call them the Israelites. But before we get there, we've got quite a bit of history to cover, right? Because we're 12-ish chapters in, and we haven't even met Abraham yet. So Genesis chapters 1 and 2 are the story of the creation of the universe. Now, the way that it's framed in our Bible is more like the creation of the world. But, when it's being told to and explained by people who have never flown in an airplane, let alone launched satellites into space, describing the creation of the universe as the creation of the world kind of makes sense, It's going to be quite a while before Copernicus and Galileo and all of them kind of shift the perspective on the shape of the universe. Nevertheless, and I don't know if I've discussed this with you previously, but as far as I can tell, planet Earth is the most important place in the universe to God. It is certainly the most important planet in the universe to us, for whom this word from God was given, right? So the first story tells about the creation of the planet in a very general kind of way, with almost the same weight and emphasis. We hear the story of how the mountains and the seas were created as the birds and the fish. Even some concepts that are almost abstract to us, like light and darkness. I mean, I know those are physical properties, but They're kind of high concepts in a way that a mountain is not. Even if you have the right perspective on it, you can even see God creating time itself, right? Uh, in the beginning, right? Well, there wasn't structure before that. So there is a beginning. And immediately he divides up day from night and creates a rhythm, a repeating rhythm of light and dark, day and night. So you can see he is putting a tempo to time, a rhythm, a heartbeat to the universe. So in that first telling, God creates all things, and at the end of each day he says it is good. But at the end of the sixth day, the day in which he not only makes the land animals, but also man and woman, he creates them in his image. And he looks upon his creation complete and says, it is very good. Genesis chapter 2 brings us another telling of the story of creation. This time, much less focus on the general natural world, a much greater focus on the specificity of mankind, man and woman. We get the story of Adam having to wait for a little while before he receives his Eve. We learn a little bit about man's role relative to the rest of creation. In many ways, humanity is sort of this intermediate step, right, between the creator and the creation. We are part of creation, certainly, and yet we are made in God's image. We are part of the natural world, and yet we are given dominion over it. And that dominion is meant to be exercised not in a way that exploits it for our gain, but in a way that is generative, in a way that promotes more life and more abundance. That's the task that Adam's given. Gosh, I just had a conversation with my son about this a couple days ago. I'm trying to remember the context. We were talking about something to do with farming. And the point at the bottom was, when things are done in balance, farming and agricultural life can actually improve the livelihood of the plants and animals being raised, right? The way that farming is done commonly today actually does the opposite. It extracts so much from the land that the land is left in worse shape. And so we have to artificially keep pumping up the soil to make it still produce. But in the way that farming practices happened for most of human history, you rotate your crops through, it replenishes the minerals there. Your herds come and they eat the grass, but they're also fertilizing the grass as they go. Like there's a balance in them. And even the way that we selectively choose these plants or these animals to help them be more productive, right? There can be and should be a positive generative relationship between people and the world and how we interact with it. It isn't always that way, and it isn't always that way anymore. But that was the call, right? To subdue the land and to have dominion over it was not to exploit the land, but to care for it, to seek the best for all of God's creatures, ourselves included. We have the fall into sin, which began with Adam and Eve claiming for themselves that which was rightly only God's, right? God did not give everything to Adam and Eve. He withheld from them the knowledge of good and evil. Prior to eating the fruit, they had the knowledge of good. But I don't know that they could recognize good conceptually because they didn't know evil. And without a contrast against it, good, it was synonymous with exists. And God would have happily, I think, withheld from them the knowledge of evil. But they desired it for themselves, and they claimed it for themselves. And immediately upon receiving it, suffering and corruption enters into the world. Adam and Eve are removed from the garden, and each has explained the consequences of their sin. And we get the first prophecy of Messiah at that time, where God promises to the snake, of all people, that he will send a descendant from Eve who will crush him and his children. From Adam and Eve, we get Cain and Abel next, and they are a picture of, well, not brotherly love. Interestingly, immediately upon exiting the garden, we already have a somewhat formalized idea of worship. Because what is it that Cain and Abel are doing that leads to the conflict between them? They're offering sacrifices to whom? To God. Now, interestingly, at this moment in history, God has not given people the right to eat animals. And so, for Cain to give the fruit of his labor, he's a farmer, I don't know if he's offering, carrots and rutabagas or what, right? But whatever it is he's harvesting, he's giving fruits and vegetables. Abel has to sacrifice an animal to give it to God. And that's maybe the only time that he is killing one of his animals. I'm sorry? Yeah, and possibly things like milk, like if you've got goats or something, you can have goat milk and goat cheese and all that kind of stuff without killing the animal. But to offer it as a sacrifice to God, Abel had to slay the animal. So already in the second generation of humans, we're already seeing sort of an anticipation of the sacrifice that God will offer for sin, right? But you might expect that Abel, the one who is already killed, would be the one who is more apt to murder. But it isn't that, right? So Abel sacrifices, let's just say it's a sheep. We don't know, herds, right? But let's just say it's a sheep. So Abel sacrifices his sheep to God. Cain sacrifices his brother to himself. Right? Because Cain wants to promote himself. What follows is a quick history of the descendants of Cain and Abel. The descendants of Cain and Seth. Many of Cain's descendants become the antagonists to what will be the people of Israel in the future. We'll get there down the road. In short order, we hear about a character named Lamech. I've probably talked about Lamech more than I should in this class, but he is just a great distillation of how wicked the people have become. And that becomes the bridge into the story of Noah. Now, Noah was a righteous man, according to Scripture. What do you suppose it means for him to be a righteous man? Did he obey the Ten Commandments? Not perfectly. And not consciously, because the Ten Commandments haven't been given yet. Right? Which, by the way, should remind us that the Ten Commandments don't decide what will be right and wrong. They explain what is right and wrong. The rightness and wrongness of murder or adultery or theft existed before the Ten Commandments were given. The law that God gives is not arbitrarily outlawing this and that. It is describing what is already good and evil. Does that make sense? So Noah is righteous principally because when God speaks to him, he listens. It says that Noah walks with God. And God gave Noah instructions to build an ark. And an ark is a... Anybody remember what an ark is? It's a box. That's right, an ark is a box. It's a container. To call it Tupperware would be a little crass and not quite right, but it's a container, right? It does not have steering, it does not have propulsion, it is a buoy in this case. It is just meant to float and hold things in it. So he builds this ark, and he puts on the ark provisions for all of the creatures in the world. For how long? Scripture does not say that Noah knew for how long. God draws all the animals in the world to him, at least a mating pair of each, with extras of all the clean animals. He brings them onto the ark, and they are on the ark for 40 days and 40 nights, right? A year and 10 days. A year and 10 days on the ark. It rains for 40 days and 40 nights. I would suggest to you that perhaps this is the moment that, Pangea is broken up. Don't know that for sure, but when it does describe the waters from below and the fountains of the deep bursting forth from beneath, the waters from above and the fountains of the deep bursting from below, that might be a nice description of what's happening as the continents are breaking apart and the waters, rushing in. I don't know. It's a fun thought one way or another. And if we understand that one of the principal effects of sin is separation, then that works really nicely too. So, floods rise. Noah and his family are preserved. Noah, for a year and 10 days, none of the predators eat the prey on the ark. There's enough food for everyone. None of the daughters-in-law kill the mother-in-law or vice versa. Like, none of that happens. Everything's fine somehow, right? The ark comes to rest. There's a whole thing with birds. We covered all that stuff. When they get off the ark, immediately they offer sacrifice, and they start to rebuild the world. Shortly sometime thereafter, Noah plants a vineyard, and he makes wine. And one night he gets drunk, and one of his sons comes in to find him indecent. And what it seems like is that he goes out and makes fun of his dad and tries to encourage his other brothers to join in. They do not. They back in and cover him with some discretion and compassion. And when Noah wakes up, finds out what happens, and he offers essentially blessings to the two sons, but to the third son, he says, you are not going to have the right to rule. Your brothers are going to take that from you, and you'll have to obey them. Which is not the strongest curse in the world. Like, there are way worse things he could have cursed him with. And I would suggest to you that this is almost a description of Noah understanding what it means to be a good ruler, right? That the good ruler does what is just, but also that he has compassion and mercy on those who are vulnerable. So while Ham exploited his father's vulnerability for sport or whatever other reason, his other the Shem and Japheth recognized that, no, in this moment of weakness, we should be kind, and we should do what we can to cover over his sins. By which I don't mean, I'm not talking about like cover-ups. I'm just saying, to help ameliorate his sins. All right, that brings us through the family of Noah We got some genealogies there, and then we got into I think that brings us up to Tower of Babel, which we covered last time. The Tower of Babel is actually a really, really short story, but I think it's a really important story. It's a story about humanity banding together to try and promote its own greatness and to ensure its own legacy in a way that, in some sense, usurps God, right? While I don't think the Tower of Babel was about like people trying to go up to heaven to overthrow God, they were trying to, you could say, find a path to heaven that doesn't require God. We're going to reach heaven on our own terms. And for you great Lutheran theologians in this room with me, you understand there is no path to heaven that goes around God. The only path to heaven is through Christ and faith in the promise of the Messiah, right? It's also a story about idolatry. And I would suggest to you that this is an important story for us in this moment in history. It's been applicable probably at least for 200 years, if not longer. But I would say right now where we stand, the Tower of Babel is a very important story for Christians to understand. Because in a number of ways, many people genuinely believe that the solution to mankind's problems will be found in the wisdom and cunning of man. And there's various ways that we're trying to affect that. The most obvious one probably to us is through technology. What was the saying maybe back in the 60s or 70s? Better living through chemistry, right? But now it's more like better living through apps or artificial intelligence or whatnot. I mean, there are certainly people who have a dream that we can sort of upload our consciousnesses and then we'll be functionally immortal, and that's just as foolish as building a tower to ascend to heaven. It's virtually the same thing, actually. So I put that out to you to make sure that we don't get swept up in the same sort of idolatry that much of our culture is headed down. Whether that's putting your faith in politicians, or whether that's putting your faith in Silicon Valley, or whether that's putting your faith in, essential oils or whatever, right? Like, salvation is found only in our God. And many of the things, and I know because I just listened back to the thing in preparation for this class, I know that we talked about many of these things that can be idols can also just be blessings if they're kept in their proper place, right? I'm not a Luddite in the idea that all technology is bad. We simply need to make sure that whatever we're doing is in service to God rather than taking the place of God, right? So I think I talked about microwaves a month ago as an example. Like, are microwaves a net good? It's made cooking a lot easier in many cases, but it's also made cooking a lot worse in many cases, right? And is a microwave good? Well, we have some in the kitchen here at the church, and when we warm up meals or pop popcorn or whatever in service of things we do for the gospel, it's wonderful, right? If you missed worship today because you were at home fixing your microwave, maybe not, right? So you got to just check where things are in the hierarchy of your heart and life. That brings us up to Genesis 11, verse 10, which is where we left off. And so, of course, riveting stuff, we're going to dive right into genealogy. I know that's what you all showed up for today. So we've got these these several sons of Noah. And we went through the genealogies of many of them already before the Tower of Babel, but this was held back for this moment for reasons that you'll see in a moment. So Shem's descendants. These are the generations of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he fathered Arpachshad 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arpachshad had lived 35 years, he fathered Shelah. And Arpachshad lived after he fathered Shelah 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he fathered Eber. And Shelah lived after he fathered Eber 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he fathered Peleg. And Eber lived after he fathered Peleg 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he fathered Reu. And Peleg lived after he fathered Reu 209 years and had other sons and daughters. When Reu had lived 32 years, he fathered Serug. And Reu lived after he fathered Serug 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he fathered Nahor. Serug lived after he fathered Nahor 200 years, and he had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he fathered Terah. And Nahor lived after he fathered Terah 119 years, and had other sons and daughters. And when Terah had lived 70 years, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Okay, a couple things I want to lift out of that for you. Number one, when you have the honor of reading Scripture in church, and I hope that many of you will, because many of you are really great readers, and you reach a section of Scripture with weird names, here's what you need to know. Number one, if they're in heaven, they don't care if you mess up their name. And if they're not in heaven, they really don't care if you mess up their name. Okay? So all you got to do is you approach it, you say it with confidence, and you keep going. It's not going to change hardly anything for the people here, right? I know sometimes people get really stressed out about, how do I say Arpachshad? I don't know. If you said Arpachshad, nobody cares. It's fine, right? But more importantly, from the narrative of Scripture, I want you to notice something. How long did Arpachshad live after he fathered his sons and daughters? And how long did Shelah live after he fathered Eber? And then Eber after he fathered Peleg? And Peleg after he fathered Reu? And Reu after he fathered Serug? 207. And Serug after he fathered Nahor? 200. Nahor after he fathered Terah? What's going on here? Life expectancy is shortening and shortening. And this was told to us would happen during the story of Noah. And, interestingly, it's not a cliff, right? It's not like Noah gets off the ark and then boom, 120 years and you're done, right? It is a gradual progression. What does that mean? Well, I think that God is working through some sort of a natural process to affect this change, rather than it just being like a miraculous mandate. If it was just a miraculous mandate, probably one generation would be 900 years and the next generation would be 120 and that's it. But as God often does, not always, but often does, he uses natural mechanisms to make his will happen. My suggestion to you, and this is pure conjecture, it doesn't have to be the case, it won't change your salvation at all, but I think about stuff, and I hope you think about stuff too. I think that something about the world itself is different after the flood. I think that, and maybe it's a genetic change in people as well, I don't know, but I think that whatever was allowing people to live for almost 1,000 years before the flood has changed after the flood. You can speculate about what that change might be. It doesn't really matter to me. Interestingly, if that's the case, it very well might affect other creatures too. A question that gets raised frequently when you talk about Genesis is, where are the dinosaurs, or where did the dinosaurs go? Right? I don't know enough about dinosaurs to make any kind of proclamations here, okay? But I do know that there are many creatures, reptiles are often one of them, that don't actually have much of a maximum size. Fish are like this often. However long they live, they just keep getting bigger. Is that the case for dinosaurs? Are the really big ones just really old? I don't know. Look, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a biologist. But could be. I don't know. Anyways, so we see this gradual tailing off of people's lifespans. And this is good for two reasons, right? The scriptural reason given is that because of man's wickedness, he can't live a millennia anymore. He's relegated to about a century. I think that's an act of mercy, right? Have you ever known somebody who lived into their old age with bitterness in their heart? I'm not asking you to name names. You can just say yes or no. Are those extra years a blessing to them? If you think about people who are selfish and who are corrupt in their inmost being, if you live 1,000 years, it's just that much longer for the sin to fester in your heart, for your rivalries to grow, for your bitterness to grow. And then the other side of it is, I think God has a plan to really populate the world. And that works probably a little better if lifespans aren't quite so long. I don't know. But we have this line leading up to Terah. We didn't hear about this Terah in the previous genealogies. Terah has 3 children that are named here: Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now, these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Okay, so now we're starting to get some people we recognize, right? Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. And Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. And now Sarai was barren. She had no child. Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of background on this guy, Abram. Do you guys know Abram? Abraham? Abram. Same dude, right? But he's going to get a name change later on. Yeah, we'll save talking about the name for later. Abram has one wife. Her name is Sarai, and the only thing we know about her so far is she's barren. That would stink, right? For that to be like how you're known in Scripture. But y'all know the story. It's going to work out okay for her in the end. Um, so Terah is taking his whole little clan, and they're going to Canaan, or Canaan. They're going there, but they don't make it. They get as far as Haran, and they stop. And now the story kind of hits its stride. Genesis chapter 12. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you." Now we take this in stride, right? You've read the story before, I'm sure, and it's cool, right? God's saying to him, "Go." Does this happen a lot? I don't know. And how did it happen? Was it in a vision and a dream? Was it a visitation? Did he show up physically? Did he send an angel? Does Abram just have a feeling in his gut? I don't think it's that one, right? Because what comes next, if it's just that, maybe, right? Maybe he just is getting antsy and he just feels propelled, and we can look back and say, oh yeah, God was doing that. But there's going to be more specifics to the message of God that makes me think this probably isn't just a feeling in his heart. Yeah. Yeah. So God spoke to Noah, right? Gave him some directions. And we just sort of go, yeah, okay, I guess. And here, God's speaking to Abram, and this is going to be an ongoing dialogue. There's going to be more times that he talks to him. I don't know what that looks like. I can promise you this. It did not happen as Abram was studying his Bible. Right? Because there was no Bible, right? So God is in communication. Abram recognizes that it is the Lord. This is a weird time in history. Because Abram's not Jewish. Right? Abram's not an Israelite. Why not? To be Jewish means to be from Judah. To be an Israelite means to be from Israel. Those people haven't been born yet. It's weird to calibrate our thinking like this, right? Because when I think of the Old Testament, we often think about it like that's the story of the Israelites. And sure, but this is actually before that's our reality. Do the other people around him know God? Do they believe in the same God? It's kind of unclear. So the word of the Lord continues, verse 2. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. All right, so this is a beautiful promise to Abram, right? God promises what to him? Yeah, so God is going to bless Abram and protect him. For what purpose? Why is God blessing him? It says it in the text. You don't have to guess. Well, he'll make him a great nation, but why? What people? All people. All people will be blessed through him. I want you to keep this firmly in your mind, because I think sometimes we think too exclusive about the way the people of God are named in Scripture, right? We often think about like, oh yeah, the Old Testament, that was like where God was only on the side of the Jewish people, and then in the New Testament, it kind of opens up to the rest of the world, and that's cool. Sort of, but not really, right? Always, God has a plan for blessing the world. Abram and his family are supposed to be a blessing to the world. And when you read through like Kings and Chronicles and stuff like that, where the Israelites are going to war with all these other people, it's easy to think about the world as the enemy. But that's not really the case. And you'll see throughout the history of Scripture that the Israelite nation wasn't meant to be closed. There were always ways for people to join in Israel. And Israel was meant to be a blessing to the world. We studied Daniel together. I hope you remember. Some of y'all weren't here for that, and that's okay. But if you do, the king in the book of Daniel is Nebuchadnezzar, right? At least in the beginning. And he is a great king from worldly standings. Who made him a great king? Well, according to Daniel, God did. And he did so with a purpose. Remember, there was the vision of the tree that God gave to Nebuchadnezzar, which was meant to show Nebuchadnezzar that I have made you great so that the people of the world will be blessed by you. You're not great for your own sake. And you're not great because you are intrinsically better. I made you great so that you could provide protection and prosperity for all the people. Yeah. I could get very derailed here onto topics, but I'm not going to. So, but one of the things I do want to highlight for you, and we here at Mission Liberty Hill might be able to take a note from this. This call to Abraham is a specific calling, a local calling, if you will. Right? This is for you. This is for your family. I have a special plan for you. So that the world around you will be blessed. Specific calling with a global impact. Yeah? So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Can you imagine living in your father's, let's call it house, probably a camp, right? But can you imagine living in your father's house until you're 75, and then God says to you, well, it's time to go be a grown-up now. Get out. Go find your own place. No, but it's not really go find your own place, is it? I will show you. If you know a little bit ahead, where is God going to take him? Do you know? Well, let's read then. Verse 5. Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. Where was Terah headed with his family before they got settled? They were heading to Canaan. Does Canaan ring a bell for you? Can you think of anywhere else that Canaan is important in the history of God's people? What's that? Yeah, so if you know the story of Exodus, people of Israel are enslaved in Egypt. They're set free to go to the promised land, and the name of the promised land was Canaan. Right? I don't know if this ever clicked for you before, but Israel going to the promised land was Israel returning to the home of Abram. So Abram, Isaac, Jacob, they're all going to live in Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Go figure. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. So this is at least a vision, right? Pardon me. Cedar is, yeah. From there he moved to the hill country, so Austin area, I guess. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent. By the way, Bethel is probably not what it's called right now in the story. So these are later, the person telling the story is saying like, yeah, it'll be Bethel, right? You know where that's at. All right. So hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negev. I highlighted this in verse 7 and verse 8. I thought this was interesting. Pretty much wherever Abram stops, what does he do? He builds an altar. Now, I think we've talked about this before, but when you build an altar to the Lord in Scripture, it won't look like this. It really, really won't look like this. Because altars in the Old Testament were meant to be built out of uncut stones. You just, whatever stones are there, you pile them up in the best way you can, and like that's what an altar is. Now, if you've ever been hiking someplace or out in the wilderness, or maybe you could just see it from the road, if you ever see a big mound of stones piled up, you go, well, that's probably not natural. Somebody probably did that. It probably marked something important, right? So as you can imagine, as Abraham's traveling, he's leaving behind a trail of these altars to the Lord. And while it is a site for him to worship, and when it says Abram called on the name of the Lord, that's what we're talking about, right? He's there, he's praying to God, he's worshiping God at each altar. He's sort of leaving behind a legacy of, oh yeah, here's where God led me. Here's where I glorified God. Here's where he led me. This is where I glorified God. And, when the world is big and the wilderness is wide, if there's no compelling reason to disturb those stones, those might have been there generations later, decades, centuries later even. I saw your hand go up. Oh, cairns. Maybe. I don't know much about cairns because that's more of like a early European turn, I think. So I don't know for sure. But yeah, it's the same idea, I think. It's, it's sort of a mound of rocks. I probably should stop there. So we'll start Genesis chapter 12, verse 10 next week. Thank you for being here. I look forward to continuing on with you guys until Jesus comes back.